Love is not what you think. In Rome, it is not a feeling. It is a duty, a law, something measured, scheduled, enforced. To love freely is to invite ruin, to let chaos seep through the cracks of order. You walk through streets where marble statues watch silently, their eyes judging every glance, every touch. Couples move carefully, as if each step, each breath is weighed against a ledger of rules they cannot see. Desire is dangerous. Passion is forbidden. Intimacy is a crime unless sanctioned by law, ritual, the cold machinery of the state. You hear the faint murmur of voices behind closed doors, the soft, fearful whispers of hands brushing, too boldly, too freely. You feel the tension in the air, as though the city itself is holding its breath, waiting for the moment order will snap, for chaos to spill into its streets. Here, love is a threat. Every heartbeat must be measured. Every sigh must be justified. Every glance carries the risk of judgment. The city watches, the law watches, and even the air you breathe feels weighed down with the consequences of wanting too much. You are 16. You stand at the edge of a threshold you cannot step back from. The air smells of oil and burning incense. The stone beneath your feet is cold, unyielding. Today, they call it sacred. They call it tradition. But you feel the weight of eyes, the invisible chains wrapped tight around your chest, pressing down with every step you take. Your father has chosen. Your family has agreed. Your life is no longer yours. The crowd gathers, murmuring blessings that feel like shackles. You are expected to smile, to accept, to offer your body and your obedience as proof of honor. The rituals are elaborate, garments heavy with meaning, symbols etched into the skin, words spoken in the name of gods whose presence you cannot deny. Every motion, every gesture has been rehearsed by generations to ensure there is no room for refusal. You sense the whispers of the spectators, the sharp eyes of matrons and priests tracking your every heartbeat. They tell you this is love, that this is the moment you become complete. But you feel only the quiet terror of surrender. Your hands are trembling, but no one sees them. Your pulse races, and the ground itself seems to tilt beneath you. You are about to participate in a union that is not yours to choose. Every glance you make, every breath you take, is measured against invisible rules you cannot break. The promise of partnership is offered as a crown, but it feels more like chains. They call it devotion. You call it entrapment. And yet, everyone around you, the parents, the priests, the neighbors, bows their heads in reverence, treating this moment as holy. You feel the disconnect deep in your chest, a quiet panic under the veneer of celebration. You are trapped in a performance of consent, a ritual of obedience, a ceremony that masks compulsion as choice. The doors open, the path is set, and you walk forward because in this world, stepping back is not permitted. Stepping back is chaos. Stepping back is shame. You move and the city watches, the law watches, and even the gods themselves seem to witness your silence. Rome celebrates. The city bursts into color and noise, banners fluttering in the sun, garlands of flowers draped over every arch and doorway. Music swells in the forums. Drums, flutes, and voices fill the air, praising fertility, union, and the sanctity of love. Priests chant blessings, and the people cheer, throwing petals into the streets, laughter ringing like bells through the marble avenues. You see the masks of joy, the smiles painted on faces, the intricate dances performed in honor of gods of passion and prosperity. Statues of Venus gleam in the sunlight, fountains spouting water that shimmers like liquid silver. Everything screams celebration, abundance, life. To the outside eye, love in Rome is radiant, communal, and sacred. But beneath this dazzling display, shadows move. Behind the veil of song and ritual, the reality is far colder. The unions praised so loudly, so publicly, are often enforced, scripted, and stripped of desire. The same hands that throw petals are the hands that bind wrists, arrange contracts, whisper commands that must be obeyed. The city's laughter is camouflage for compliance. The music masks murmurs of resistance. You realize the festivals, the feasts, the offerings, they are not about love at all. They are about control. Public adoration disguises private coercion. Every blessing is measured, every smile rehearsed, every cheer a mask for fear and obligation. The joy is a spectacle. The reality is unspoken, grim, and inescapable. And now you watch, as we watch, as countless others have watched before. The pain of those compelled to participate in rituals they did not choose. You feel the weight of witnessing suffering as if it were entertainment. The whispers of history brush against your conscience. Will you look away? Will you remain silent? To see is to know. To know is to act. Silence in the face of their subjugation is complicity. If you linger here, if you let these stories pass without acknowledgement, you are part of the machinery that continues to glorify pain as spectacle. You stand at the edge of a courtyard, the air thick with incense and expectation. Candles flicker along the walls, casting shadows that twist and shiver like living things. The crowd has dispersed, leaving only a handful of figures whose faces are solemn, reverent, and cold. You know that what is about to happen is sanctioned, ordained, required, but you cannot yet grasp its full name, its full weight. It begins with gestures so subtle, so precise, that you would mistake them for ceremony. Hands are guided, not touched. Eyes meet, but only as permitted. Words are whispered, repeated, scripted, as though the gods themselves have dictated the motions. The rite claims to sanctify union, to bless love, but there is an unmistakable edge beneath the surface. Fear coils quietly in your stomach, uncertainty tightens your chest. You are both participant and observer in a ritual that is not yours to refuse. The walls seem to close in, the candlelight flickering across faces that do not belong to you, hands that are not yours, lips that speak only the language of obligation. Every motion is measured. Every pause is deliberate. You begin to sense the invisible audience, the law, the priests, the city itself, all watching, ensuring compliance. This is intimacy, but it is imposed, not chosen. It exists to enforce, to control, to transform desire into duty. The ritual can occur before union, during, or in some cases, instead of it. It is designed to make the body obey before the heart ever consents. It is a performance in which every heartbeat is dictated by law, every breath a pledge to something older and more inescapable than your own will. You feel the tension in the room, the quiet dread of what is expected, the unspoken terror that underlies the pageantry of devotion. And still, its name remains unspoken. They will tell you it is sacred, necessary, holy. They will not tell you that it is feared even by those who enforce it. You understand only one truth in this moment, that what you are about to witness, and perhaps endure, is beyond consent. It is an intimacy imposed by the weight of state and tradition, a shadow beneath the surface of every celebration, every blessing, every act called love. The words are everywhere. Latin syllables, polished and precise, flowing from lips and scrolls alike, carrying an authority that cannot be questioned. Pietas, duty, fides, loyalty, castitas, purity, fertilitas, fertility. Each sounds like a blessing, a promise, a value to aspire to. And yet, each is a chain, a measure, a sentence disguised as virtue. They speak of devotion but mean obedience. They speak of union but demand compliance. They speak of purity but strip the soul of choice. The language of Rome is a veil, soft and beautiful, hiding the iron within. You feel it pressing against you even now, how words that appear benign, even sacred, can bend the will and quiet resistance. Legal phrases creep into conversation, insidious in their civility. Consent is assumed. Blessing is commanded. Tradition becomes law. Emotional harm is normalized before it can be recognized. You realize that no one ever calls it what it is. No one ever says this is punishment. And yet, it functions as one. The body is compelled. The heart is coerced. The mind is disciplined into compliance with a system that calls every act of suffering a ritual of virtue. Every syllable whispers a lie. Every oath binds. You begin to understand the horror of language that conceals violence, that dresses compulsion in the garb of sacred duty. A phrase that celebrates fertility masks fear. A word that promises purity conceals anguish. A term that sanctifies love enforces obedience. And in the silence between the words, in the pause before the ceremonies, the truth presses down. The ritual, the union, the love that Rome celebrates, it is punishment. Not called by that name, never acknowledged as such. Yet punishment it is, administered with precision, justified with eloquence, and hidden beneath a language so beautiful you almost do not recognize its cruelty until it has already taken hold. The priests and priestesses stand between you and what you might have called freedom. They are the gatekeepers of intimacy, the arbiters of desire, the enforcers of divine will. Every union, every glance, every whispered word must pass through their judgment. Their nod is blessing, their silence is condemnation. You feel the weight of their eyes as if the gods themselves were leaning down to watch your every heartbeat. To love without approval is sacrilege. To desire without sanction is impiety. Even the briefest hesitation, even the smallest reluctance, is read as defiance. The language of devotion becomes the language of debt. The heart that dares to want is already owing. The body that hesitates is already condemned. Desire is no longer private. It is a currency, an obligation, a ritual payment to powers that care little for emotion and everything for control. You sense the calculated choreography of their authority. Hands guide, eyes direct, lips instruct. Every motion is a decree, every sigh a required acknowledgement of hierarchy. The priests are not merely observers, they are midwives of compliance, architects of submission. And you, whether bride or groom, are both vessel and subject. The sacred and the erotic intertwine, but only to the extent that obedience is secured. Refusal is impossible. It is heresy. It is dishonor. You realize that what you have called love, what you have imagined as intimacy, has been stripped of choice and recast as servitude. Your body, your attention, your affection, all become obligations owed to a system that measures devotion not by feeling but by compliance. And now, as you watch, as you listen, as the story unfolds, ask yourself, how often do you consume tales of suffering like this without acknowledgement? How often do you watch injustice as though it were mere spectacle, forgetting that the victims lived, breathed, and obeyed under terror? To subscribe, to bear witness, is the bare minimum. Silence in the face of their pain is complicity. If you do not subscribe, if you do not confront this history, explain yourself. Comment. Speak. Engage. Because to witness and remain passive is to be part of the machinery that continues to dress control as devotion, obedience as love, debt as desire. Stone walls still whisper. In courtyards and chambers long abandoned, you can trace the echoes of what once took place. The floors are worn in precise paths, polished by feet that moved in obedience rather than desire. Niches and alcoves, small and deliberate, hint at gestures repeated for centuries, motions of ritual intimacy encoded into architecture itself. In frescoes, carved reliefs, and mosaic floors, you see symbols that recur, vines entwined around pillars, hands meeting at measured intervals, figures whose proximity is both intimate and formal. Their expressions are serene, almost joyous, but the symmetry, the pattern, the order betrays intention. There is no spontaneity here, only repetition. Objects, cups, statues, braziers, stand as witnesses, as silent enforcers of rules that governed bodies and hearts alike. Domestic spaces were not neutral. Bedrooms were designed with thresholds, with corners and angles that directed motion, guided contact, constrained privacy. Every object, every altar, every token of fertility, every carving of myth, served as instruction, as a reminder, as an observer. The same arrangements appear across villas, across cities, across the empire, as if each house were a classroom, each ritual a lesson in obedience masked as devotion. Even in the smallest details, you sense the weight of the system. The placement of a bed, the orientation of a statue, the repetition of a pattern on the wall. Objects imply action. Objects dictate behavior. And the more carefully you study them, the more you understand that every touch, every glance, every ritualized gesture was not born of love, but of law. These relics do not scream. They do not confess. They only exist, silent and unyielding, a network of evidence pointing to the same truth. Intimacy was monitored, orchestrated, and imposed. What appears celebratory is evidence of control. What appears private is a map of obligation. And across time, across space, the same patterns repeat, leaving only the shadows of consent behind. The ritual ends, but the chains remain. For women, the world is narrower, their bodies measured against expectation long after the ceremony concludes. Reputation, honor, virtue, these are judged, recorded, and policed, even in the absence of witnesses. A glance. A word, a misstep could undo them. Their compliance is perpetual, their freedom is an illusion. Silence is demanded and the law enforces it. Speak and you invite shame. Resist and you invite punishment. Desire, once disciplined in ritual, is now policed in every breath, every interaction, every choice for the rest of their lives. For men, the consequences are different, but no less binding. Authority and desire are intertwined with duty, and failure to perform, failure to observe the rules, is noted in the ledger of law and expectation. Their pleasure is sanctioned, their will circumscribed. A misstep is not merely personal. It is a breach against family, against gods, against the state. Even consent, when granted, is an illusion, measured and recorded by eyes that never sleep. All participants are bound by a legal silence. Nothing can be confessed, nothing can be resisted, nothing can be questioned. The body remembers, the mind trembles, the soul acquiesces. The ritual is completed, yet punishment persists, in memory, in expectation, in the endless, invisible gaze of society. And the weight of it is lifelong. Every union afterward is haunted. Every relationship is shadowed by precedent. Every choice is framed by obligation. The ritual may have ended, but its judgment continues, a relentless echo that follows its subjects through decades, across marriages, across generations. The ceremony was merely the beginning. The punishment, quiet, systemic, invisible, is forever. The city does not record it. There are no scrolls, no inscriptions, no statues that speak of the trembling, of the terror, of the shame. Yet it exists, in the silence between words, in the lowered eyes of those who endured. Honor becomes a cage. Purity is weighed, measured, enforced, not as virtue, but as a standard of obedience. The violation of these codes leaves marks not on bodies alone, but on the very standing of a person in the eyes of family, neighbors, gods. Shame travels faster than law. It seeps into meals, into hearths, into every domestic corner. A whisper of disfavor can undo years of careful compliance. Pollution is not only ritual, it is social. A misstep, a glance that faltered, a sigh that betrayed hesitation. These carry consequences that are spoken of in nods, in hushed warnings, in silent exclusion. The pain is everywhere, but it is nowhere written. It is carried in the posture, the voice, the way the eyes avoid contact. And the suffering is not private. Every insult, every humiliation, every trace of coercion ripples through the household, through kinship networks, through the city itself. Mothers caution daughters in the same measured tones that once restrained them. Fathers pass down expectations in gestures that never admit doubt. Every participant becomes both vessel and messenger of the ritual's cost. You see it in the quiet dinners, in the bowed heads at festivals, in the rigid lines of comportment in courtyards and villas. Pain is collective. Fear is inherited. Obedience is assumed, not chosen. Every smile, every carefully placed word, every ritualized motion afterward carries with it the echo of what was endured and the threat of what is still expected. Rome celebrates love, fertility, devotion, but it never names this suffering. And yet, if you look closely, you can see it everywhere, etched into faces, traced in gestures, hidden behind words that speak only of honor and duty. The emotional cost is real, and it is enduring, even as history pretends it does not exist. You search the scrolls, you scan the histories, you ask the chroniclers, and yet the ritual barely appears. Not because it was unimportant, not because it did not shape lives, bind bodies, and dictate hearts. It vanishes because remembering it threatened the very structures that survived it. Those who wrote the histories, emperors, senators, priests, had every reason to bury it. To speak openly of coercion disguised as devotion was to question authority itself. To recount suffering was to indict the system. And so, through careful omission, selective preservation, and moral editing, the record was reshaped. The ritual did not disappear by accident. It was discarded, excised, rendered invisible to all who might later question, reflect, or mourn. Later historians reframed love, marriage, devotion, fertility. They glorified festivals, exalted unions, celebrated obedience. They ignored the trembling bodies, the silent shame, the lives bent by duty masquerading as love. The violence became invisible, the punishment became tradition, and the human cost was written out of memory. And yet it was never lost. It waits, hidden in the architecture, the art, the hushed whispers of surviving texts. It waits for those willing to look, willing to witness, willing to name it for what it was: punishment. Punishment disguised as tradition. Punishment celebrated as devotion. Here, in this space, the darkest punishments in history, we remember what others buried. We follow the shadows that the comfortable refuse to see. If you turn away now, if you unsubscribe, if you prefer ease over acknowledgement, ask yourself, what do you fear more, discomfort or truth? And if you remain silent, explain why. Speak, challenge, bear witness. Because to watch and to forget is to collude. To ignore the love rituals of Rome is to erase suffering once more. Here, we do not allow it. Here, we remember. Love, the word drifts lightly in your mind, soft as a whisper, warm as a promise. And yet, in Rome, it was sharpened into a weapon. It was measured, enforced, and demanded. The same word that inspires devotion and connection became a tool of control, a mechanism of obedience, a mask for discipline. You see now that what they called love was never gentle. It was never mutual. It was an obligation, a duty, a debt owed to family, to gods, to the state. To desire freely was forbidden, to obey was celebrated. What the city celebrated as union, as fertility, as devotion, was in truth a punishment administered over generations, ritualized into the very architecture of society, codified into every law, every gesture, every whispered expectation. The rituals, the festivals, the legal language, the sacred approval, all converged to reveal the truth. Love in Rome was punishment. It enforced hierarchy, measured loyalty, disciplined desire. It broke wills, controlled bodies, and erased choice. And yet, it was always framed as virtue, as tradition, as something holy. The word itself became a lie. To understand this is to see Rome differently. To see love not as a gift, but as a mechanism. To see the ritual not as celebration, but as sentence. To recognize that what was called devotion was, in fact, the most intimate form of state-imposed obedience. Love, in the city that claimed to honor it, was never freedom. It was punishment. No one raised a sword. No tyrant screamed commands. No shadowed figure enacted cruelty by hand. The punishment required no villain, no monster, no act of malice. It required only law, only ritual, only the quiet complicity of silence. The city itself became the enforcer. The gods themselves seemed to approve in measured, impassive quiet. You feel it now, the weight of a system that needs nothing more than compliance. Every glance, every gesture, every heartbeat of the participants is noted, measured, accounted for, even when no one speaks. The city's gaze never wavers. The law never sleeps. The ritual is repeated, generation after generation, invisible but absolute. The punishment is perfect because it hides in plain sight. And the most effective punishments are never called what they are. They are draped in honor, ritual, devotion, love. The victims obey, not because of fear of pain, but because of fear of shame, fear of rejection, fear of transgression. Every obligation becomes sacred. Every act of control becomes holy. Every compliance becomes proof of virtue. And yet, beneath the veneer of reverence, the truth remains. Desire was never free, love was never choice, intimacy was never private. The city moves on. Festivals continue. Scrolls are written and edited. Statues gleam in sunlight. And still, the echoes linger in marble halls, in silent bedrooms, in the bloodlines and memory of those who endured. You leave the story unsettled, uneasy, haunted by the realization that the most enduring, insidious punishments are those that require no cruelty at all. Because in Rome, the sacred was the law was obedience, and obedience was the punishment itself.